Today we get to start on our biggest project yet, the subfloor! I'm really excited to start on this project because it's gonna be a multiple day project and it's gonna be a little bit more technical than the last two, even though cutting holes into your van can seem pretty technical. What you're gonna need for this project are 2 by 2 inch by 8 foot studs, as I'm calling them. Those are gonna be the framing pieces for the bottom of the van. You want 2 by 2 inches because 2 by 2 is not actually 2 inches by 2 inches. It's 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. You can get it in pressure treated. That's probably better. They didn't have it at the Home Depot that I went to, so I just got the regular one. You're gonna need 1 inch rigid foam board, the purple one. I got 2 sheets of that. And then you're gonna need 3/4 inch plywood. I got 2 sheets of that, and I suspect that I'm going to need more than 2 sheets of it. What I'm gonna use to adhere the studs to the van is gonna be this Loctite PL premium construction adhesive. There wasn't like a lot of options at the store, and this one looked like a really good option, so I got this. And you're gonna need the caulking gun that fits the big jumbo size one. I also got Thompson's water seal. I'm gonna coat all of the wood with this so that it's for sure waterproof and I'm not getting any mold in my subfloor. I'm gonna use a little foam roller to apply that, and I'll link all of this stuff down below. Box cutter to cut the rigid foam board, impact driver to drive the 1.5 inch exterior wood screws that I got that I'm going to use to attach the plywood to the studs. You really don't want your screws to go more than halfway through your stud because it compromises the integrity of the stud. So I actually would need something between 1.5 inch and 1 3/4 inch. I figured that this would be good enough, but you really want to use exterior or deck screws or galvanized screws so that they don't rust over time. If you're new to doing this, I highly recommend looking at your wood before you purchase it. You really want to try to get wood that isn't warped if possible. The stuff that I bought is fairly straight, but it was still a little bit wet, which means that I had to wait to let it dry. The pressure treated wood though typically ends up coming pretty straight, so that's why I feel like it's kind of a fail-safe to get that one. You want to make sure to look down the length of the wood and seeing if it's bowing any which way, and look at it at 2 different angles. And then same with the plywood. You want to make sure that your plywood isn't all like chipped or like looking like shit. The plywood is really hard to get at the store, but it's worth getting good pieces, especially when you're paying that much money for wood right now. All right, so the first thing I plan on doing is kind of getting all of these framed in a way that makes sense with the layout in the van. I really want to try to get the outside edges and like the bottom part here framed, get at least 1 cross beam going, and have them spaced out well enough but close enough that it's going to be a really durable subfloor. There are also points in the van that I'm calling high impact points that I'm going to make sure I'm reinforcing. One of them is right here where I would be getting in and out of the van constantly. But I'm sure it's going to be pretty strong to begin with, but like I really want to make it super sturdy. All right, well, after 1.5 million cuts, I think I've got the basic frame set up for my van. So this is the main layout, and then I'll have to do a little bit of reinforcing the curves in the corners. This wasn't really that hard to do. It was actually super fun kind of puzzling it all together, but I will say some of the boards are a little bit warped, and I'm trying to scheme on how I am going to clamp them down to the van. I think I might go to Home Depot and buy a few vices for the outside edge pieces, specifically the one by the sliding door. And then I think I'm just gonna end up having to find a bunch of like heavy stuff in my house to weigh it all down. And I think a word of advice would be to try to get, if your wood is warped at all, try to get it so that the bow side is down, and then you can kind of just like clamp down the ends. This is my first time doing this, so I don't know if that's the correct answer, but that's what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish up the final touches of getting this all dry fit and then move on to the next step. All right, so this is the final product for the framing. Now I just gotta waterproof it all. I'm also gonna label each piece before I take it back out so I know where it's supposed to go when I put it back in. we are painted, caffeinated, and ready to go. I am going to go to Home Depot while I wait for all this stuff to dry, see if I can find some vice grips. And I think I'm gonna go to the grocery store too, and I'll catch y'all back here. All right, well, I am back from doing all my chores. This wood is not dry yet. It says it actually should take up to 2 days for it to dry, but with how warm it's been the past couple days, I think it'll be dry by tomorrow. So that concludes it for today. I'm gonna have to continue it tomorrow because I gotta wait for the wood to dry. So I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, so it's the next day and some of this stuff is still not dry. I was reading the directions on the sealant and it turns out that if you over apply it, it can be oily and sticky. So I'm gonna wipe off the excess sealant and let it dry for a little bit longer in the sun. It doesn't say it on the Thompson's water seal, but I think it would be a good idea to treat this sealant like a stain, where you put it on the wood and then you wipe it with a paper towel. I think that makes more sense now on the second day than just like leaving it to dry. For some reason I thought it was gonna be a coating, kind of like a gloss seal, but it is acting more like a stain. All right, well, it was a pretty warm day, so I got the framing in here because it all feels dry. So I'm gonna go ahead and glue it down to the bottom of the van. Something I haven't really put together is exactly how I'm gonna weigh everything down. I'm definitely gonna prioritize the warped wood. I have some heavy stuff like a couple of coolers and other things, but I'm kind of just flying by the seat of my pants with this one. I did not like doing that. That Loctite was not my favorite thing to apply with. It was so thick. I got into a groove of it over time, doing like large beads rather than like one long running continuous bead. It was really hard to use and like big, clunky, and awkward. I will say one tube is enough. Yeah, that was just like the least fun thing I've done in a while. Are there mosquitoes already? Oh my gosh. I will see y'all tomorrow. I am done today. So it's the next day and I got some heavier stuff. I got some of these trigger clamps to clamp this down and let it dry overnight. I've kind of like tested out to see how the individual pieces feel, and it feels like it is glued down on there. So I'm imagining that the Loctite was really effective, even though it was kind of a headache to apply. So the goal today is to remove all the heavy stuff and then measure the rigid foam board and start cutting it to fit in between the framing. This is where we are at right now. It's looking pretty good if I do say so myself. Yeah, it took a while to do it, but honestly, everything takes longer than you think it does, and people say that, and it's true. So the next thing to do is to draw the template for the plywood that is going to go on top of the framing. I've seen a couple of different ways to do this. Paper seems to be the better option just because it's easier to get inside of the corners and get the shapes correct. So yeah, let's draw a template. 3/4 inch plywood is no joke, dude. This thing is so heavy. Oh my God. Okay, I'm going to put my plywood long ways going across the van, and then there will be 2 smaller pieces in the back where the garage is going to be. I'm deciding to do that because I really want to minimize the amount of seams that are going to be in like the walking area. I've got paper, tape, scissor, pencils, and I'm just gonna kind of figure it out as I go. I'll probably work panel by panel, so once I hit like the 4-foot mark here, I'll put it on the plywood and then cut that piece out and put it in here to make sure that it fits. Tell me this ain't absolutely smashing, love. Paper is the way to go. That actually made pretty quick work of making a template. Also, pro tip, put the part that is going to be outside that you're gonna see all the time on the end that you're not gonna cut, so it's straight and looks nice. I'm feeling pretty hopeful about getting this one on the first cut, as long as I don't fuck up the jigsaw. I always mess up the jigsaw. So close. Now how do we make it perfect? Attempt number 2. It is so close. Woo! I'm pretty proud of that. Well, I am currently losing daylight, and my goal today is to get all of these pieces cut so I can stain them with waterproofing so that I can hopefully install them tomorrow and have it dry overnight as much as possible. So I'm probably gonna cut the video here today so that I can be more productive and get more done without having to film, and I will catch y'all in the morning. Don't keep cutting after the sun goes down. That's all I have to report from last night. I was in a hell of my own making, trying to make all of these pieces of plywood fit in here perfectly correctly, and it didn't end up working out, and I gave up and I just stained it anyway. It's off by a tiny amount in all of the places, and most people probably won't even notice it, but I was just like getting so frustrated about it. I got everything done that I needed to get done, but I wasn't happy about it. These are all the pieces that I stained. This one, fuck you, honestly might be worth just cutting that piece in half to make it fit, because I had such a nightmare of like lifting it up and putting it in the van. Also, I put the sound deadening in a couple of days ago while doing this project. It'll be in a different video, but do not put the sound deadening material on the wheel wells until you finish putting the plywood down. It's gonna make it really hard for you to get the plywood flush with the wheel well. The stain on this should be dry pretty soon. In the meantime, I'm gonna mark where all of these studs are on the metal framing so that when it comes time to put screws into it, I'll know where the studs are. I do have a couple of boards that kind of veer one way or another, and I'm still trying to figure out how I'm gonna be able to mark that. So I will let you know when I figure that out. I think that's just like a natural part of this whole project, is that, you know, there are a lot of imperfections since this is my first time doing it. And I would just say, be kind to yourself, because there are people who do this professionally for a living, and so they're obviously gonna be really good at it, but part of the process of me wanting to get this van was learning how to do all this stuff, so I'm really excited about it, and I really try not to get too down on myself. Last night was another story. Looking back at everything today, it looks pretty good in here, so I'm happy about it. Gonna get everything prepped for putting these plywood boards in once and for all and getting my subfloor finished. So you can see here that I'm just like marking where the boards meet up at the end. I'll use these as reference points, and then I'll put them down over on the other end, and like these little ones on the side over here. And also, get you a shop vac. This hand vacuum has changed my life already. I was just using my landlord's regular vacuum, which worked really well, but this thing is like whoop, whoop, whoop. Pick up any little tiny thing anytime. It's the best. And I match it. Make sure to mark this up high enough, because you're gonna have 3/4 inch ply in here, so if you mark it too low, you might not see it when you put it in. This board right here is my one main board that veers the most, and so I kind of just put a little arrow that indicates which way it veers. Don't really know if that'll be helpful, but that's what I'm doing. This stuff is so freaking heavy. I'm pretty strong. So I think I'm just gonna do one board at a time so that I can see the studs on the other end, and maybe even draw lines across the plywood so I know what I'm drilling into. On second thought, I am going to draw the lines on this board right now, and then I'm gonna put the rest of them in one at a time and draw the lines on them. I'm kind of nervous about screwing a whole board in and then it like moving slightly and then the rest of the board's not fitting in, so I'm gonna do that instead. Forgetting who you are, for what you said to me. I know my friends and I would probably turn dark. I know that if you hide, it doesn't go away. Alright, goblins, ghouls, and shadow people, this is kind of what it looks like. Can you see it? Because honestly, it's looking pretty That's a little bit better. Boo, 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 boo. So it sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but I am going to pre-drill each hole, and then I'm gonna screw the hole in every single time rather than pre-drilling everything, because I'm just like really worried everything's gonna migrate slightly and then my drill holes won't be in the right place. So it's gonna take me a really long time, but that's showbiz, baby. This discrepancy right here is what I lost my mind over last night. I actually ended up cutting too much on this side, and you can see the stud underneath there. So that's gonna be really annoying to drill, but yeah, don't get carried away with your cuts. You're gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine, and it's okay if it's a couple millimeters off, because you've literally never done this before. Also, that side where the stud's exposed, I'm gonna end up putting foam insulation on the wheel wells, so it'll get filled in and covered anyway, so I'm not too worried about it from an aesthetic standpoint or stuff getting in there. Something my friend Miles taught me is that if you're pre-drilling holes, if you take your screw and you see where the top of it's gonna end up, you can put a little piece of tape here so that when you're drilling down, you know how far you're going and you don't want to go past the depth of your screw. So I'm gonna do that. Won't really need the pre-drilled hole. I can never say that. Pre-holed drill. Pre-blurp blurp. Blurp blurp blurp. Okay. So boom. I just put in the first row of screws at the top, and now what I'm thinking is that I can actually pre-drill the rest of the board that I'm working on right now because it is locked and secured in place. Pre-drilling the holes did not take that long, and I gotta say it made driving the screws in way easier. Highly recommend. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Subfloor finito. Woohoo! Another project done. Let's look at my work. I have a few imperfections that I want to point out just for you if you're doing a van build at home, things to think about. Out of the whole van, my main weak point is right here. It's a little bit, it has a little bit of flex, and that's because there was nothing to anchor this corner into. There is rigid foam board underneath that. And then along all the way down this, I did anchor down this corner into the stud that goes along the back of the van, but I'm not too worried about it because I will be putting a floor on top of this. And also it's in the garage, so it's not gonna be directly like walked on top of once the floor gets in. This is the spot that I got into the cutting purgatory last night, and I accidentally cut this part. I had to change how this whole piece was because I had it like shifted over too much. So I kind of just cut my losses literally and just took the L on that. You can also tell here again where I cut too much out. And then lastly is this minor imperfection that was driving me absolutely nuts. It's such a small difference, but the thing that was really bothering me is that when you open the sliding door van, you can see that. And when I put the floor on, you're still gonna be able to see it. So I might try to figure out something to do where I can make it look like more seamless over time. Other than that though, I mean, everything went pretty well. So this was definitely my favorite project thus far, even though I had a couple of hiccups last night with just getting into a jigsaw purgatory. Overall, this project cost me between $450 and $500. That includes all of like the hand vac, which was like 30 bucks. I got a new drill bit set, not necessarily a new drill. The like wood on its own and the foam board was around $275. You could probably do it for a little bit cheaper if you're not buying all the trigger clamps and other stuff like that. But I definitely do recommend all of the things that I used in this video. The adhesive that I bought to adhere this wood to the ground was really, really strong and really good and effective. Like I was able to kind of like jump around and walk all over it, but it was a pain in the ass to get out of the caulking gun. Recommend doing like circular beads rather than like one long strip, which is probably the way you're supposed to do it, but I didn't look anything up prior. I think one of the most effective things that I did in this project was tracing the lines where the studs are and then pre-drilling the holes and putting that little piece of tape on the drill bit. It just made like really quick work of drilling that stuff without feeling like I was bottoming out or I was gonna hit the metal in the bottom of the van. Overall, I think this looks like a really, really nice foundation. It lifts up about 2 inches off of the ground. I'm 5'9", so I still have about like 5 or 6 inches overhead, give or take. If you found this video useful or helpful or you liked it, please consider giving it a like. Also consider subscribing if you want to see more videos like this. I'm going to be doing an entire van build series, and this is just the beginning, so I'd love to have everyone along for the journey with me. And please leave a comment if you have any constructive feedback or words of encouragement, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.